and showing the title of this evening's webinar, The Language of Love. Now, I've been meaning to do something like this for some time because I do a number of webinars. Some of you people maybe been on one of my webinars before, or maybe you've been getting my weekly emails from the Fertile Mind. If you haven't, I'll talk more about those towards the end. And I talk a lot about obviously how you can utilise your mind to have a better experience during your journey, and actually how you can utilise your mind to increase your chance of success. And occasionally I talk about relationships, but I wanted to do a whole special kind of concentrated time on relationships because it's a subject close to my heart, because having been through the journey, 10 years of double infertility, and we went on to conceive naturally just before starting ICSI. I'm so thankful, I count my blessings those days, that we are still together. And I wasn't going to say it wasn't easy. And I meet too many individuals and couples who don't actually make it, who are struggling and don't survive. And I think people underestimate the pressure on a relationship. People underestimate the general stress level people going through infertility. And I think often people don't recognise, or what's not talked about is the impact that can have on a relationship. And it's a study recently in Sweden showed that the most common reason people stop fertility treatment is actually the emotional stress. And there's another study shows that actually the stress on the relationship is huge, and it can get into a vicious circle. It's also showed that those relationships where there were kind of stress and difficulty in the relationship, those couples are less likely to be successful. So unfortunately, it can become again to like a vicious circle. And I'm really thankful for the things that we learnt on our journey through different marriage enrichment weekends and things like that we went on, which I look back and see were invaluable to keep us a sense of being united. And I want to share some of those things with you tonight. And I'm calling it the language of love because what we're talking about is love languages. And often, unfortunately, during infertility or any relationship, not just those going through infertility, it's common in any relationship, people kind of drift apart and live their own kind of lives in a way. And I think, unfortunately, it can be quite common on fertility, where you really want a sense of being united and being together. And often there isn't that emotional connection. And I experienced it myself when I thought I had to be the strong one, and I wasn't really emotionally either engaged with my feelings, wasn't aware of my feelings. I was bearing them because they were too painful, and they were tapping into all sorts of things from back to childhood. And also I thought I needed to be the strong one and be there for my wife, and that was actually creating an emotional gap between us. And my wife wanted me to be there with her in the thick and thin and really share how I was feeling rather than keeping them bottled up. And I look back, and at the time, the moment, I was diagnosed infertile after 8 years into our journey. Really felt we started to get somewhere. I was diagnosed infertile, and it was like a real kick in the teeth. But looking back, it was the best and worst thing that happened to me. At the time, it was the worst. But it was my really wake-up call to really connect with my emotions, go through the journey my wife was going through. She went through a grieving process, and I wasn't really in tune with my emotions. That was the time I kind of came to the party really emotionally and connected. And some of the things I've been really thankful we learnt, I'm going to share tonight. And it's about, what it's all made about is actually we do have different models of the world. We have different experiences in life. And just like the different countries in the world, different parts of the world speak different languages, as individuals, we have our own kind of models of the world in our head. We have our own experiences of situations, and often we don't speak the same language as other people going through the same situation. Or if we don't speak the same language as our partner going through the same situation. And I want to help you understand how you can communicate and express love in a way that your partner understands. And you might be feeling there, and come on to this, feeling actually you're the one who needs to feel more loved. Actually, it can work both ways. This can work just by one of you understanding these principles, and I'll come on to that in a bit more in a minute. So the question I pose to you is, do you know you're communicating your love to your partner in a way they will understand and receive it? And is your partner communicating their love to you in a way you understand and receive it? And the bottom line is, I guess the question is, how loved do you feel? And some of the principles I want to share this evening are from the work of an American relationship counselor called Gary Chapman, who really understood the importance of feeling loved and how important that is for well-being. With his 20 years of seeing clients, he identified 5 primary ways you can give and receive love. And we often give love in the way we prefer to receive it, which may not be the way our partner prefers to receive it. And your partner may be demonstrating love to you in a way he prefers to receive it, which may not be the way you prefer to receive it. And I've seen that with my own clients, how important that emotional sense of feeling loved is, whether they're feeling love, they're loving themselves or other people are loving them. Just explore a bit more about what I mean by kind of models of the world, how that works. We take in information through our senses. And so we have external situations. It could be someone says something. It could be you see someone pregnant. You know how that is. And we take in that information through our senses. And what happens is that information gets filtered before it gets into our mind. Your unconscious mind's taking in 2 million bits of information per second. And so your intuition, all these things you're picking up, but you're only consciously aware of between 5 and 9 things any one time. Your conscious mind can't cope with any more than that. So your unconscious mind filters what it puts through to your conscious mind. Only pushes through to your conscious mind those things you think are important at this moment in time. And those filters are made up of a number of things. Meta programs are like Myers-Briggs personality types, different personality types. Your values, your beliefs and your values are one, and your memories are another. So you've got a number of filters that filters that information through. And from that, we delete, we distort, we generalize the information to delete that through, to filter that through to the 5 and 9 any one moment in time. And through those filters, we create our own model of the world, which is why if you reminisce with family or friends and talk about things from the past, you have a very different experience or memory or recollection of what went on. It's because you all had a very different experience of that situation at the time. You all had your own model of the world you're kind of working from or living through. And it's through that model of the world actually it creates an internal state, an internal feeling. So you see, you have an external event, it goes through this process that creates an internal state, a feeling or an internal response to that situation, which creates a physiology. You might either feel calm or maybe feel kind of angry or sweaty or kind of palm sweaty or heart racing. You get a kind of a physiological response to that external event as well. And that actually shapes your behavior as well. So a bit of a kind of science behind how your mind works and how you do filter information. And from that, you create your own model of the world. And the key thing is to understand your partner's model of the world and for them to understand your model of the world. And that can take some time and effort to ask questions to really understand. And that's one of the things I found is to really understand how I can communicate in a way my partner, my wife, really understands. And it talks about how loved do you feel, and it's a bit of a corny, it's a bit a corny what's the word, kind of model, if you like, is we all have like a love tank inside us. It's a bit corny, but I think it actually can work. When you think, oh, how loved do you feel? Is your love tank full? Is it half empty? Is it empty? And often we're running on empty, and that's when problems can creep in. And when we first meet our partners, our relationship goes through different stages. And at the beginning, these little things that your partner does that bug you now, maybe you weren't even aware of back then. And it's true in a way that often opposites attract and then drive each other mad. It's about understanding each other and working, living and loving each other. And often the things we took for granted, before start can get in the way of feeling loved. Things that your partner did to make you feel loved, or gestures they did, now become expectations, and then when they're not done, you start feeling disgruntled that they're not being met. So there's all sorts of things in your relationship. I haven't got time to go through the details of the stages of the relationship, but the bottom line is the question I ask is, how loved do you feel? And hopefully some of the things we're going to do tonight will show you ways you can start to feel more loved by demonstrating your love to your partner. And I've got a health warning. And the health warning is actually understanding your partner's love language can actually radically change their behaviour. So it's by you understanding how you can love your partner differently can actually radically change their behaviour, and it can actually transform your relationship. Because you can't change your partner, you can only change you and how you relate to your partner. But actually, in by doing that, you can actually change them. And I'll give an example. Gary Chapman quotes a story where he was in his office and in the building, he was in his shared building, and someone popped their head around the door to say, "If you've got 2 minutes, Dr. Chapman, I'd like to talk about my husband." And she's saying how she's been trying to get her husband to decorate their bedroom for 9 months, been nagging him at him for 9 months, and just don't know what to do. She ended up telling that every time she suggests it, he doesn't do it. They've had some wonderful weather weekends, which are ideal for maybe decorating, and he goes and washes the car instead. He does anything but actually decorate the bedroom, and she just doesn't know what to do, and it's really starting to bug her and become an issue. And Gary Chapman asked her, said, "Okay, can I just check two things? Does he actually know you want the bedroom painted?" And of course, she said, "Of course he does. I've been at him for 9 months. Of course he knows. What kind of question is that?" He said, "Okay, I want you to never mention it again, ever." She said, "Well, how's that going to help?" So Gary said, "My second question is, does he ever do helpful things around the house, things you do appreciate?" She goes, "Oh, yes, he takes the garbage out. He sorts and maintains the car. He does this, he does that." She lists quite a few things he does do, which she appreciates. So Gary's advice was, as he said, never mention the decorating again. And also when he does something you appreciate, to give him a verbal compliment, recognise it and say something. And this lady went away rather disgruntled, not sure how on earth this was actually going to help getting either the bedroom decorated or actually help their relationship. And sure enough, within a month, she popped her head around the door saying, "You wouldn't believe it, Gary, the bedroom's been decorated." And it's not about manipulation, it's about letting know each other, that knowing you love your partner and knowing they know you love them in a way they understand. And when you feel loved, when you feel that emotional connection, that sense of unity, then things can change, behaviours do change. And when you feel that sense of unity, that's what I wish for you, that sense of unity. So as you go through your journey, there's that emotional connection and you feel united on your journey. So I mentioned how there's 5 primary ways you can give or receive love. And I was going to go through those now. I'm going to take them through in more detail, but in summary, just to give you an overview. One is kind of words of affirmation. The second one is quality time. The third one is gifts. Next one is acts of service. And the fifth one is physical touch. And I just want to take one each in turn and spend a while focusing on each one to help you really understand what I mean by these words, so you can hopefully understand or understand which one maybe you are, which one your partner is. And we all like giving, receiving love in all 5 ways. We tend to have a preference, a stronger one or maybe 2. Have a preference. So it doesn't mean ignore the rest or we don't necessarily appreciate the others at certain times, but we tend to have a preference, a stronger one that makes a difference. Our default one, as it were, that we prefer to receive love, which means it's our default one for giving love. So starting with words of affirmation. And by the way, again, if any questions at any point, just type them in the box and I shall pick them up at the most appropriate time. So starting with words of affirmation, what do we mean by this? Well, we call these kind of love languages, different languages for love. And each one has almost a different dialect within that. So if we take words of affirmation, there's different types of words of affirmation. So one could be compliments, simple compliments. And to be honest, I'm very poor at doing this. I'm very poor at kind of acknowledging and complimenting my wife. It just doesn't seem to come to me naturally. Maybe it's because compliments don't really affect me very much. But so one is kind of compliments, and that's not an excuse. So if I know that, I can't use that as an excuse saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't give compliments. It's just not my psyche. It's not my love language." But having known that, I can make more effort to make sure I do give compliments. Uh, and Mark Twain says, I can leave off a good compliment for 2 months. So for those people who, for words of affirmation is their primary love language, then compliments may be very, very important to them. Some other kind of dialects within this love language is encouraging words. So encouraging people. We all have areas where we feel insecure or have untapped potential. And maybe your partner is waiting for some encouragement for you to help in those areas. We could all do with some encouraging words at times from our mate. So, yeah, compliments and encouraging words. Another dialect is kind words. And even in the Christian marriage service, they say love is kind. And I'm always reminded of my wife had a kind of great Uncle Harry, who's no longer with us now, sadly. But there's one thing that really, really struck me was he was just constantly kind to his wife, kind to his children, his grown-up children. And I once, before we were married, I asked him, because he's been married like almost kind of 70 years or something. I said, well, so what's the secret to a long and happy marriage? And he told me always be kind. I've never forgotten that about being kind. And one of the things about being kind to think about is how we say things. Our tone of voice often says more than the words we use. So being careful how we say things, because when we hear things, we often take them personally. Even though this is a whole different talk, but even though actually when someone is harsh to us, it's actually nothing to do with us. It's their stuff. They're communicating unhelpfully. That's a whole different kind of subject. But often we do take it personally. And so saying things in a kind way, recognizing actually it's our emotions going on. It's nothing to do with the other person. There's no reason we can't be kind to people and express what we want to express in a loving way. There's nothing you can't say that you can't say in love. Another dialect in this love language is humble words. And this is about, I guess, having requests instead of demands. Requesting things from your partner if they have a request rather than demanding. So being humble and kind. And it goes back to this one area kind of psychology where there's different kind of dynamics in relationships. And you're either in one of three states. You're either an adult, or you're either being a parent, or you're either being a child. And even as an adult, sometimes we might be being a child. We might be a parent to another adult. And when we're being a parent, it's often the person we're engaged with, even if it's another adult. If we're being parents, often they slip into being a child and get an unhelpful dynamic. Or even child, even more unhelpful dynamic. The most helpful dynamic, obviously, between adults is both being adult kind of dynamic. So being humble and kind and encouraging, having requests and not demands, is ways where you can give those words of affirmation. And one area of words of affirmation is actually the opposite. And for me, actually, words of affirmation is one of my two primary love languages, but it's actually not these dialects. It's not, the positive words of affirmation. For me, it's the absence of criticism or judgment. Unlike Mark Twain says he can live off a good compliment for 2 months. Often compliments just go over my head. That's maybe I'm not very good at giving compliments. But actually, criticism or judgment really kind of cuts me, and I'm really sensitive to those. And Solomon says the tongue has the power to give life or death. So the absence of criticism or judgment is also part of this love language of words of affirmation. So here's a quick overview of what I mean by words of affirmation. So moving on to the next love language. The next love language is quality time. And just to explore that in a bit more detail, again, this love language has various dialects. And one aspect of quality time could be undivided attention. And this is not necessarily focused, holding hands, each other, standing there, looking each other's eyes, holding each other's hands. That can be actually very helpful, especially if you're actually arguing, and that's a different subject. When you're arguing, actually holding hands can actually be really useful. Maybe stops each other throwing things at each other. But in all seriousness, holding hands can actually help. If you're arguing, it shows you're actually fighting for clarification. You're fighting to actually get back that sense of unity rather than get at each other. But undivided attention doesn't necessarily mean staring each other's eyes, holding each other's hands. It just means focused attention. It means doing something together, focused on each other maybe. And it could be simple as you can imagine. Sometimes I'm kicking a ball to my son and go backwards and forth, and we're just being together, and it's like a bit of quality time, just doing something together. If Bevan's having a bath, my wife's having a bath, I would just be in the bathroom with her, just chatting, and just give us 20 minutes of so just being with each other, no disruptions, just being that, having undivided attention. And it's about being in the moment, I guess. So it's finding those ways where you can give that undivided attention. Actually, my wife, her love language is quality time. So this is kind of important for me to understand those ways, how I can give that undivided attention. One aspect of quality time could be quality activities. Doing something that your partner would enjoy and doing it wholeheartedly, not doing it begrudgingly. And I had two friends who I was talking about these love languages to, and the wife loved going to the ballet or the opera. She loved that kind of culture. He wasn't his cup of tea at all. So occasionally, when they went out for an evening into the town, she would go to the ballet opera, and he would go and see a nice kind of film that he wanted to see, an action film, and then meet up afterwards. It kind of worked for them. But I challenged him to see, actually, as an act of love, would you be willing to go to the ballet opera with your wife and do it wholeheartedly, knowing why you do it? And it's kind of recipe here. It's where one wants to and is willing to, but both know why you're doing it. So one wants to and is willing to, but you both know why you're doing it. And you're doing it to express love by being each other, by being with each other, having that shared experience. And obviously, sometimes having these quality activities, doing things together, can create future memories. So one thing you might want to do is, if you tap in and think might be your love language, is make a list of things you would like your partner to do with you, or ask them to make a list of things they would love you to do with them. Because often we have these kind of hobbies and things we like doing, and as you get into marriage, often we get kind of dropped because our partner doesn't like doing them. Or conversely, it can go the other way, where partners are focused on so much on the things they enjoy doing, they don't spend enough time doing things the other partner likes to do. So maybe it's activities, quality activities. The other one is quality conversation. And often this is about actually being real with each other. And this is what I found on our journey. I wasn't being real, being honest. I wasn't being honest about my feelings, partly because I wasn't being honest with myself about how I felt about our infertility. And thus I couldn't really share and be real and honest to my wife. And of course, if quality time, having that emotional connection was so important to her. And this is about kind of learning to listen. Often, sometimes we need to learn to listen. Or as it says there, learning to listen twice. No, but seriously, so often I found I needed to learn to listen, and often generalization often can be men, but women can be the same. Some people want to jump in with solutions. When my wife was sharing how she's feeling or she's just talking, I'm not really listening for understanding. I was listening to give a solution because I thought she wanted a solution, and that's actually undermining her. So often we need to learn to listen. That's a whole kind of a separate talk as well. You can actually teach people to be a good listener, and it's also learning to talk. This is where I had to do, learning to listen to myself and listen to my feelings and learn to express my feelings. Even going as basic as looking at a page of feeling words and working out which feeling I was feeling at the time. I'm becoming more adept now, obviously being a therapist and being a therapist for a number of years. But back then, I was really so disconnected with my feelings. I wasn't really connected and really understand what feelings I was feeling at any point in time. So often it's kind of learning to listen and learning to talk, so you can share those deep emotions and how you're feeling and have that connection about being real and being honest. And so, I mean, it's the whole separate talk to cover those in more detail, but in a nutshell, that's an essence of quality time. And you may feel, actually, as I've spoken about that, maybe you can get a sense whether your quality time over your partner is. But at the end, I'll give you some other questions to help you perhaps identify your primary love language and your partner's. So that's quality time. Okay, now moving on to gifts. And gifts are actually quite important symbols of love. And if you people who study anthropology, basically studying the kind of different people groups around the world, and if you look at that, they look at different people groups around the world, most of them, or nearly all of them, have a gift as part of, or gift giving, as part of their love or marriage process. Often, they often don't call it a marriage ceremony. They often have some kind of ritual ceremony they go through when two people get together as in a partnership or as mates. And so often they have this kind of gift giving ritual. So there's an element of gifts being can be quite important in expressing love, the fundamental means of expressing love. And often, when you look at a gift someone's given you, it reminds you of that person that gave it to you. And also, when you choose a gift or buy a gift or make a gift, you must be thinking of the recipient when you're doing that. So there's all you can see there's sentiment and thought, or hopefully thought, gone into it. And again, gifts can have very different dialects. Obviously, they are symbols of love, and this is obviously more important for those where this is their primary love language. And we've got friends who actually, on their honeymoon, the husband was snorkeling, and when he came out of the water, the wife noticed, he didn't even notice, his wife noticed almost straight away his wedding ring was no longer on his finger. And it must have come off while he'd been in the water. And his immediate reaction was, that's actually quite sad, but it's not the end of the day. It's a bit of metal. We can get another one that can symbolise what we want it to symbolise. But for Sally, it was very different. You know, Sally, this was her primary love language. She demanded he went back in the water until he found it. So off he duly went, newly married, didn't want to upset his wife. He went back into the water, and thankfully, quite quickly, he did manage to find it. So thankfully, the sun was shining through the shallow water and was gleaming on it. So he managed to find the ring. So clearly, for her, the giving, receiving of the rings, those gifts, were important symbols of love, and they weren't leaving the honeymoon until she found it. And these gifts may be bought, made, or found. They don't have to be expensive. Again, different dialects. Some people like expensive gifts. Actually, some people prefer gifts that have been made, where there's been maybe perhaps more thought gone into it. And my wife likes to remind me at times where, after her first married, I thought it'd be nice to buy her some flowers. You know, all women like flowers. At that point, I didn't know this wasn't her primary love language, and she'd rather go out for dinner and have this kind of decent conversation with me than have a bunch of flowers. But anyway, at that point, I was still naive and unaware of these things, and I was buying her flowers. And there was a nice old man outside the tube station, living in London at the time, and I bought some nice flowers, some coronations from him, and used to give her these flowers quite regularly. Having completely forgotten that my wife used to be a florist for 6 years when she was a teenager. A lot of evenings and weekends working at a florist, and got to a very high standard. And so she's quite knows her flowers, and she knows cheap flowers from the station, from the old man at the station when she sees them. And I had no idea. Even sometimes I splashed out and bought roses from this stall. I had no idea for years what she was doing, using every trick in the book to make these flowers last longer than they actually would have done. Things like, you may not know this, if you've got roses or flowers drooping, she used to put pins in the heads so you can't see them, but put pins through the heads to make them stand up longer, and things like that. So I wouldn't feel so bad at buying flowers that died or drooping within days. So I now know all these things and realise actually what's important for my wife is not necessarily gifts, especially not soft toys. I learned that pretty quickly, but actually it's quality time for her. And a bit of an overlap between quality time and gifts could be a gift of self, being there when your partner needs you. A friend of mine was a doctor, and his wife was pregnant, and he was actually at the time he was a doctor, but he was also a radio presenter presenting medical programs on BBC. And he was about to go on air, and he got a call from his wife saying, "I think my waters are broken. I think things are starting." And he's just about to go on air. She says, "Oh, don't worry, love, you'll be fine. It's your first baby. You'll be out yet. I'll do this show, and I'll come straight home." And he only just made it for the birth. Just made it for the birth. As you can imagine, she wasn't very happy. He did arrive with a dozen red roses, but I'd imagine she would rather he was there than had a bunch of roses. So maybe gifts, maybe you'll call your love language or your partner's love language. So that's that love language of gifts. Moving on to the next love language, which is acts of service. And again, different dialects. And one important thing about acts of service is doing things that you know your partner would like you to do, not what you think they want you to do. And my wife, she's primary love language is quality time, but it's close by is acts of service. And if I do all sorts of things, I think, well, I do quite a lot around the house. I look, I maintain the car, I do this, I look after the computers, I do this. But often they're taken for granted because they're not really acknowledged as acts of service, because they're not really things that she wants me to do. But if I do something that she would really love me to do, and it's maybe I clean the bathroom, she suddenly goes, "Oh, that's very more recognised." It's what's most important to them, because my wife would rather have a clean bathroom than a highly maintained computer. So it's working out what's important for your partner and doing those things. And also it's actually working out how they want it done as well. It's attention. My wife, she's a real attention to detail. I could clean the bathroom and she'll find a little bit I haven't done. So having that attention to detail, not cleaning it the way I think, "Oh, that's fine." It's cleaning the way I'd know she would like it done. It's having that attention to detail and not giving it the liquor promise, "I think that one's fine." So it's recognizing I'm again doing it for her and doing it how she would really appreciate it, rather than just doing it for doing its sake. So I'm doing it almost as an act of love. So she knows I've gone the extra mile, that I wouldn't normally do it that way. I know it, but I know it's important to her, which is why I do it that way. And another aspect of acts of service can actually challenge the role of stereotypes. So I just mentioned about cleaning the bathroom. Why shouldn't I clean the bathroom? I do clean the bathroom fairly frequently. I've given that an example as to how I do it, and when I do it, it's recognised more than actually doing some other things. It does actually often challenge the role of stereotypes. So that's kind of acts of service. Moving on to the next one. The next one is quite an interesting one. It's physical touch. And touch can be an incredibly powerful communication of love. If you think about hugs, how you feel when someone gives you a hug, it's an incredibly powerful connection, incredibly powerful communication of love. And a touch, just like words, touch can communicate love or hate. If you just imagine a slap to a child, can be devastating. If touch, particularly if the touch is their love language. And it's the same for adults. The wrong type of touch can be really, really devastating. And unfortunately, most men think this is their primary love language because of sex. But actually, it's not always the case. Yes, sex is physical touch. But if I take myself, my primary love language is words of affirmation or lack of critical words. If my wife had been critical with me all day, would I really want to make love with her? No. And that just shows actually maybe touch is not my primary love language, that words of affirmation comes ahead of touch. So men need to be careful about actually touch may not be their primary love language. Check it with the others first. Would you want to make love with someone, your partner, if they've ignored you all day? So Men assume touch is their primary language, but it may not be. It may be, but often it may not be. And it's not just sex. Physical touch could be explicit touch. It could be like a massage where you're explicitly choosing and have explicit touch, like a massage, holding hands, and things like that. And I love when we say watching a film together on the sofa. I love to be close enough so we touch. For me, it's quite important. Have that physical connection. It gives me that emotional connection when we're together. It could be implicit touch, which is just a touching or just stroking as you brush past someone, or as you're reaching for someone, you can just touch someone. There's that implicit touch. It's just as important as explicit touch. So physical touch can be important. Holding hands, maybe, as you're walking down the street, is more important for some people than others. So you can see touch is another way of giving and receiving love. And that's the fifth love language. So you can actually see this is quite a simple concept in a way. It can be extremely, extremely powerful. And just to recap, so to help you remember the five love languages, have a little kind of quiz. If you feel especially loved when a person gives you undivided attention and spends time alone with you, what love language do you think that is? It's quality time. If you feel especially loved by someone who brings you a gift and other tangible expressions of love, what love language do you think that is? That was pretty obvious, I think. Gifts. Or if you feel especially loved when people express how grateful they are for you for the simple things you do each day, what love language do you think you are? Words of affirmation. Or if you feel especially loved when a person expresses feelings for you through physical contact, that's physical touch. Or if you feel especially loved when someone pitches in to help you and perhaps doing things around the house, you're probably acts of service. And I'm hoping by now you're starting to get a hint maybe of which primary love language you are. And some other questions maybe to help you is to help you identify what your partner's love languages are. But these questions actually to help you what your love language is. So what does your partner do that hurts you most deeply? Or what have you most often requested from your partner? In what ways do you regularly express love to your partner? And your answers to those questions will hopefully start indicating perhaps which love language you are. And if you find it difficult to articulate or understand which is your primary love language, it could be one of two things. It could be that your love tank is actually full, and it's been full for some time, and you've been giving love and receiving love in a number of ways, and you're feeling loved. And that maybe is why you maybe struggle to identify which is your primary love language. Or it could be the opposite. It could be your love tank has been empty for some time. And because it's been empty for some time, you actually can't remember which is your primary love language. And if it's one of those two cases, if you're struggling maybe to think about or identify which is your primary love language, you can maybe go back and recall the experience of falling in love with your partner. What did you like about your partner then? And maybe that will prompt you to identify what it is attracted you to them. Maybe those things are your primary love language. So through this, hopefully you can begin to understand perhaps what your primary love language is and what your partner's is. And of course, you can't make your partner love you in any particular way. You can't change your partner. But if you are communicating your love to your partner in the way they receive it, they will feel more loved. And when you feel more loved, you reciprocate that love. And it'd be great if you can share this with your partner. It can be even more powerful if you both understand each other's love language and choose to try and love each other in those ways. That's fabulous. And this is one thing I often recommend when I work with couples. And you could even openly discuss it and agree, identify which is your love language. You can even, if you want, make a list of particular ways, the dialects, different ways your partner could demonstrate their love to you. And often I recommend writing those ways out, or one different thing your partner could do to demonstrate their love to you. Write on a bit of paper, screw it up and put it in a bowl or something. And maybe have a bowl each, and each day you take one out the other, your partner's bowl, something they've written down, and see if you kind of find a way of doing that, demonstrating your love in that way, either that day or that week. It sounds a bit kind of contrived in a way, but it's just helping you understand each other's language. It's not saying do forever. It's something you help you just identify your partner's language. As the more we become fluent in it, the less you need that bowl. And it's a way of just giving that injection of love into each other's love tank, which I think is particularly important as you go through infertility due to the stresses and strains which are often inevitable on the journey. And often there are sometimes big decisions to be made. And having that sense of being loved, being united. It's about in that emotional connection, be united, feeling that emotional connection, togetherness on the journey is what we're trying to achieve through this. So any questions on that? Any questions on what we've covered so far? Just feel free to type the question. Those who join us slightly later, you should see a questions box on your screen. And if you type a question in there, only I see it, it will come up and I'll be able to answer it. So do feel free to type any questions you want in the question box. Or maybe you're struggling to see how you can actually implement this in a way, or maybe you're working out whether you could be able to share this with your partner or how it could work with just you know it. So feel free to put a question in if you have any questions. I shall pause for a minute longer just in case someone is typing away. No questions so far. Okay, so I shall continue. I want just to finish by showing how some of you may be new to myself. I should probably introduce myself at the beginning. I kind of assumed most of you know who I am. Those who've been following my website, my emails, and my webinars up to now. I'm very sorry. I should have just introduced myself for those who don't know me. My name is Russell Davis, as you know. I founded the Fertile Mind. As I mentioned, my wife and I went through 10 years of actually double infertility, 8 years. My wife was infertile and she went through a journey of kind of healing and got her cycle back, her fertility back, and then we found out that I was infertile and kind of kicking the teeth. We did go on to conceive naturally, and I went on to actually train as a cognitive hypnotherapist. I'm now a cognitive hypnotherapist, been a therapist for many years now, and I specialise in fertility. I'm the founder of the Fertile Mind and also the National Council of Hypnotherapists Fertility Specialist Advisor. And I work with women and couples all over the world, helping them understand how their mind may be affecting their journey, both their experience of fertility and actually how they can actually increase their fertility utilising the mind-body link. So I have fertility hypnosis programs. I have a weekly email that goes out to people and things like that. So that's a bit more about me. And I've got questions just come in, and I'll explain a bit more how, if you want to understand more about my work and how I can help you further, then I'll explain that in a minute. Do we approach baby making sex differently to love making sex? Good question. So do we approach baby making sex differently to love making sex? My answer to that is absolutely not. So I think the danger is sometimes when you're struggling to conceive, love making can become quite mechanical. And that's why I share some of these things like the love languages to find ways you can feel more in loved. Yes, there's some obviously timing of it. So understanding your cycle, understanding when you are most fertile, because not everyone ovulates on day 14. It's a complete myth. It's understanding when you ovulate. So there's elements of doing obviously timing of lovemaking, but it's trying to make it as much as lovemaking as you can, keeping that intimacy keeping that kind of emotional attachment and not turning it into just a mechanical thing, which unfortunately it can be when you're struggling to conceive. So yeah, thank you for that question. But yeah, my recommendation is absolutely you find every way of making it love making, and not just kind of baby making. Yeah, as girls say, sometimes you can't be bothered, but we have to. It's the time of the month, and you have to. You can't be bothered. But it's finding ways where you can, I guess, woo each other and feel that love. And there are times, yeah, you feel actually we don't feel like it, but we're choosing to do it. We know why we're choosing to do it, and it's just recognizing actually you want to have a child together because you want that future together. You want to be parents together, and recognizing the emotional connection behind the fact it's not just you want a baby. There's a reason there. You want to have a family together. Why do you want a family together? Well, hopefully because you love each other and you want to share that experience and share your lives with each other. So it's reconnecting some of the reasons why you're going through this, because quite often they can be long forgotten when you get through the tests and the month cycles and focusing on the kind of the mechanics rather than actually the relationship and what you're trying to achieve. So thank you for that. Any other questions, yeah, do feel free to type them in. But that's one of the reasons, yeah, I do share some of these things to help you in those times to feel more loved and feel that more emotional connection, because often that does just get lost in the process and the stress of the journey. So those who